Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Local Historic District Commission virtual workshop. My name is Regan Miner, and I am the Vice Chairman of the Norwich Historic District Commission, and we are delighted to be the hosts for this virtual workshop today. I'd love to introduce our guest that we have this evening. He'll be presenting. We have Mary Dunn, who is a Certified Local Government and Grants Coordinator for the State Historic Preservation Office. There's Brad Scheid, who is a Circuit Rider for Preservation Connecticut. And we have Stacy Vero, who is also a circuit rider for Preservation Connecticut. So without further ado, Mary, I'm going to ask you to take it away and show us your presentation. So thank you.
Okay, I'm just changing the name on my little, so people know who I am. So thank you, Regan, and thank you for agreeing to host the virtual workshop. What we're going to do tonight is I'm going to give a very short presentation because the format we've been following has been I give a short presentation on some topics that we plan to discuss by way of case studies, interaction with commissioners. However, the last couple meetings, commissioners have wanted to just talk about, specific things that they're addressing right now. So I'm still going to go through the presentation, and then we'll have the option of doing some case studies, which Brad will walk us through, or just taking, I know we've received a lot of questions already, so we will have time to get to your questions as well. But if you'd like to start with the questions, and then if we have time, we can do the case studies. We can do it that way. So
yeah,
again,
I think that's the better way to do it, is to deal with the questions first. So do we have the questions, Stacy? Well, anyway.
Yep. Mary's got them. Yep. So we can post them when we're ready to do that.
Okay. Yeah. After Mary's.
The case study questions or questions from the commissioners? Which questions, Brad?
Yeah, questions from the commissioners.
I think state. Yeah, no, I don't have those. Okay.
Sorry, nope, we do not have those. Those have not been submitted formally, but we know that they exist.
Oh, okay. So if you have questions, I'm going to I'm going to do the presentation and then put some questions in the chat as they occur to you, and we will address those. That might be the easiest because I don't know how many people are on, but we want to make sure everybody, that we get to everybody. So, okay, without any more further ado, here we go. Okay. So as I said, this presentation or this workshop is going to be basically about evaluating projects for the certificate of appropriateness that you commissioners are responsible for administering. And as you all know, because A, because you know, and B, because you've been to some of these trainings before, as a commission, you were set up under state statute. Probably most of you. We've had some commissioners over the last couple of meetings or commissions that were set up under town charter or statewide ordinance or citywide ordinance. So not all commissions are set up under section 7147 of the state statutes, but a large majority of them are. And there's about 86 of them across the state. So hopefully this will apply to you. But even the ones that aren't set up under 7147 sort of model their purpose under the state statutes, which is basically to identify local resources that have historical or architectural significance, and then put in place local legislation for their protection. And so as a commission, you have some primary responsibilities under the state statutes, one of which is to establish rules of procedure. That's actually a mandate. That's not a may, but that's a shall. And most of you have, I'm sure. If you have not, we can help you with that. But in your rules of procedure, this is how you tell the town and your property owners how you conduct your business. And so you reference the state statute. You could mention the framework for your decision making, meaning, do you follow the Secretary of the Interior standards? Do you have a published set of design review guidelines? You establish the purpose of the commission so people know why you exist. You talk about what officers you have, and you're required to have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. And then the membership and all the roles and responsibilities of the general membership. As you know, you need to have 5 regular members and 3 alternates, all of which should be attending all of the meetings. You might address attendance and what's required. Some commissioners will only allow for 3 absences in a row before they move to remove the officer from the commission. And then how do you fill a vacancy? And then you talk about your meetings, which must be conducted under general rules of public meetings. So you should be posting your regular meeting schedule by the 1st of the year on your town website. And then, if you have emergency meetings or special meetings, those can be done, I think, 24 hours in advance of the meeting. If you don't have a lot of business, and I know some of you have lots of business every meeting, and some of you may not. So if you can, maybe provide for at least one meeting that's just about education or information, like this one, for example. Make sure there's a quorum present for voting on the matters that are coming before you. In order to initiate that whole thing, the chair asks for a motion, and then it is seconded by somebody on each agenda item. So you don't just jump in and go, okay, we're going to talk about this. You have to have a resolution to vote on, a motion. Negative motions are generally not permitted. So, for example, our Historic Preservation Council, the resolutions that we put in front of them, or the motions we put in front of them, are, we vote to approve this application. However, it may end up that they don't approve the application, but that's the motion. And so the subsequent vote might be no, or the vote might be, we're going to table this motion. But you don't put a motion on the floor that says, we don't want to do this. It just doesn't, it doesn't lead to the right type of discussion. So, and then although the chair, drives the motion process, any member can call for a vote. And then since you do public hearings, you probably have members of the public that want to speak, and you should probably set time limits, like 3 to 5 minutes, because if you've got a lot of people that want to speak on an issue, you want to make sure everybody gets a chance, but you're not all there till, midnight. So those are basic meeting, parameters. Then also under state statute, commissions are supposed to file an annual report to our office. And if you're a certified local government, there's a special extra report that you need to file with me on a yearly basis. And if you had no idea you were supposed to do this, or you haven't been doing it, never fear. We can start anytime, and I can tell you, I can just send you the format. It's basically, we've kind of honed it down to a fill in the blank. So that's not too onerous, but it is required. And then probably the most important thing, even though it's a may and not a shall, is that you adopt regulations to provide guidance to your property owners as to the factors to be considered in preparing an application for a certificate of appropriateness, because that is generally the crux of your work. And I think you all know what's required, or what requires a certificate of appropriateness. But in providing guidance, I know many of you have published design review guidelines. That's what we're talking about. You want to make sure that your property owners understand what the process is and how you make your decisions. And I mentioned the Secretary of the Interior standards before. You're not required to use those in your decision-making process, but we do recommend them as a basis, only because they've been around for decades. They've been tried in the courts. They're fairly flexible, and they apply to all types of buildings. They address, all types of materials, construction, new construction, even demolition. So, and rather than invent something out of whole cloth, start with the standards, because they're pretty strong. But there are 4 treatment approaches in the standards, and so preservation, which is sort of a frozen in time sort of approach. I mean, actually, it's a great approach if you have a building that retains a lot of integrity in terms of material and workmanship and form. You want to preserve as much of that as possible, so your program is one of ongoing maintenance and repair rather than replacement and new construction. But we don't we don't recommend that you use that as your standards or your treatment approach. And then there's restoration, which probably would not, well, actually it might come before you, but restoration is recreating, well, no, you should not use this one, mainly because you don't regulate interiors, but restoration is selecting a specific time period of that building, architecturally speaking, and then retaining anything that existed during that period and still exists, of course, and removing anything else. And this was actually, I guess, kind of popular during the 1970s, during the bicentennial. People would take old buildings and remove anything that had nothing to do with 1776. And, if it went back that far. We don't recommend that either. I mean, it is an approach, but it's not an appropriate one for your work. And then reconstruction you may see, because it's the act of creating either a feature of a building or an entire building that did exist at one time, but does no longer. And so if someone's doing reconstruction, you need really good documentation, photographs, maybe original design drawings if there are one. And this would be something like a cupola on a roof or a front porch. If you were going to do an entire building, I would not recommend that in an historic district, recreating a building that no longer exists. It's generally done to just help people know what did exist at one time. So it's sort of for interpretive purposes. And then there's the rehab standards. And Stacy, let me know if I freeze or something, because it just said my internet connection is unstable. So let me know if I'm, not there.
You're good.
Okay, so rehab is the one that.
Oh, no, you're not moving forward. You're not moving forward.
Now
there you go. Now you are good.
Oh, okay, so rehab is the most flexible because it deals with buildings that are in use or buildings that you want to put into use. And so it's just a little bit more, it's easier to use for the adaptive reviews of a vacant building. And obviously, since the buildings you generally are working with are buildings that are being lived in by people. So you can't necessarily take a preservation approach all the time. So we do recommend the standards for rehab. We use the standards for rehab in our office. And actually the federal government requires that we use that treatment approach for our tax credit applications. So a lot of people think the standards are not flexible and that they're a list of, commandments and do's and don'ts, but they're really not. They're really just a set of recommendations based on best practices and based on ongoing research and discovery of the way material works and how new materials might work. And so that is why they're sort of flexible, but there's still some core tenets, one of which being that you want to retain as much historic character and architectural character of the building as possible. And this means not just materials, but also form. So if you're taking an old abandoned schoolhouse and turning it into something else like apartments or a restaurant, you still want it to read like a school. And so it's not just the materials that you want to retain, but the form. And if you're a creative developer, you can really do some, creative, interesting things with a building while still retaining its original form. And especially where there are distinctive finishes or construction techniques present that may or may not be readily available anymore, you want to retain those as well. And then, of course, any deteriorated historic features should be repaired rather than replaced. But if they're so far gone that they need to be replaced, they should be replaced in kind. That's the general rule of thumb under rehab, as well as actually all the approaches. So as we mentioned, for training purposes, today we were going to talk about substitute building materials, replacement windows, and solar installations. So I'm just going to go over a few things to consider, and then we do have some case studies, which Brad will walk you through. But we could also we could start with your questions so that we make sure we get to the questions, okay? So substitute building materials. I'm sure you get applications where the property owner wants to use a new material. So just some things that you should ask yourself or the property owner. Does the existing material really have to be replaced? Can it be repaired instead? And can it be replaced in kind? So do you actually need to use this new substitute material? And especially if the original item is still intact, but it would be really difficult to find a craftsman to recreate it. You definitely don't want to lose that original feature. You're just not going to be able to recreate it to look exactly the same. You're just not. And it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the original feature. So you should, take as many steps as possible to retain original features like that. Does the proposed replacement material match the original in color and texture? And this comes up, with exteriors, wood. You can tell wood. You can tell wood from vinyl. You can, even from the street. PCV has a very smooth, clean finish that wood does not, even painted wood. You want to have that same texture. On interiors, which you do not regulate, but which presented to me once, plaster on ceilings and walls. You just can't. If you want to replace it with drywall, it's just not the same. So you want to make sure that it's got the same texture, especially. If you want to consider a substitute material, the property owner just has to bring you design drawings and specifications, and even a sample of the feature. You really should not feel obligated to approve a substitute material about which you know nothing. You need to be able to tell what the material looks like, and especially what the design is going to be. Because again, if they're going to replace, a spindled frieze, you want to know that it's going to look as much like the original as possible. But again, it probably won't. But you especially don't want it to be replaced with like a squared off column. So you need to know exactly what they plan to do, in replacing that material. And then, of course, how long has the replacement material been in use? That's the biggie. Because if you look at this picture, this is, I don't want to trash any specific brand name. This is PCV, I think, right, Stacy? Anyway, as you can see, it's already delaminating and peeling off. So it's not something that will, quote, last forever. And it certainly won't look very good. This was after about 10 years in place. And just some more pictures.
It's a composite material, so
yeah
did not hold up the way it was intended to.
Right. Are the fabricators or the installers experienced? I was just reading I think it was the brief for substitute materials. It was agreed that they could substitute wood, a wood balustrade for a substitute material, and the substitute material was to be painted, but they didn't paint the base of it, and so it just started absorbing moisture and rotting. And so the substitute material may or may not have been able to last a long time, but because it wasn't installed properly, that was even worse. It just didn't last that long. So make sure that that people know how to handle the material and install it properly. And also, how do the original and the replacement materials work together? Because you don't want them expanding and contracting at different rates. You don't want one absorbing moisture and the other repelling moisture, therefore causing potential damage to the original. And then if the work is reversible, that's generally, I'm still not going to say you should definitely approve substitute materials if you don't think it's appropriate. But if the work is reversible without damage to the original building or its materials, then that is generally a little comfort level that if something goes wrong, it can just be, taken down and there's no harm done, more or less. So that's substitute building materials. And then replacement windows, I'm sure, is another issue that a lot of you are facing. And the number one reason we get in our office for replacing windows, and this is when people like move into their building. Like, I just bought a house last week, and of course I need to replace my windows immediately, because they just assume, their original So they're not energy efficient. And maybe they're not energy efficient because they haven't been maintained. They're missing window panes, or they haven't been painted or caulked or weather stripped. But those very easy, maintenance procedures can go a long, long way to making that original window just as, if not more, energy efficient than the replacement. So just make sure that they're not comparing a literally old drafty window to a new replacement window. Fix the old window and it's going to last a lot longer. You don't even lose most of your heat through the windows or your energy. So that's not really a very good argument either. And then, of course, as we're all finding, replacement windows themselves, they may have a 10 or 20-year warranty, which is not the same as 100 years. But sometimes it doesn't even last that long. So there's just, unless you're missing the window entirely, I have never found really compelling reasons for replacing original windows. And then lastly is solar installations. There's a case study for that Brad will walk you through. These are identified in state statutes, the ones, your statute. I think this statute was updated in the 70s during the energy crisis. And so it just cautioned commissioners that they can't just out of hand reject a COA for a solar installation unless they find that installation has a substantial impairment on the historic character or appearance of the district. So you don't have to automatically accept them, but you can't automatically reject them. You have to find out what the property owner is going to use and where they're going to be put. So if you don't have solar installations in your design review guidelines now, we can offer some information on how to add those so that you feel more comfortable making your decisions too. But considerations are, again, review the work in the context of your design review guidelines. So if you don't have them in there, add a chapter. Make sure that they've addressed other energy efficiency measures as well, because, throwing solar panels on top of a house that has no insulation or that, really is, leaking energy, it's not going to really save energy. So you want to make sure that there's a whole package there. And there are a variety of options for the placement of solar technology. It could be a ground-mounted array, which wouldn't affect the historic structure at all, or you could allow like a new rear addition, or maybe put them on a large barn that might be south-facing. And then, of course, there is the roof-mounted, which is the most popular, and which does work in certain situations. If you can go with ground-mounted, try to put them in an unobtrusive area visually. We generally don't recommend that vegetation cover up a change to an exterior architectural feature on the house itself, but you might use it to screen a ground-mounted solar array, as long as you're not blocking the sun from it, of course, just as you would, an air conditioning condenser, or whatever, condensing unit. And then, of course, if you've got a flat rear addition or something like that, or we had one person put them, they were able to put them on the front of the house, but they had like a parapet. And so they just put them on the little flat part of that, so you couldn't even see them. And they were effective. Roof mounted. This is the home of Preservation Connecticut. They successfully put solar panels on their roof. And as you can see, they did a very good job because they're very low in profile. They don't, project past the roof ridge. I think it's good that it covers the entire pitch, because I think if you use just little singular panels, I think that draws more attention than if the entire pitch is covered. Now, they were lucky because they've got a side-facing gable that they could put them on. So there's many views of the house where you don't notice them at all. So that was very, that made it a little bit easier. We talked about reversibility, and most solar panels do come with a limited lifespan or they're leased. And so if you're going to approve a COA, you might put a condition in that they be removed from the house or the building once the lease is up. You should also caution your property owners if they're going to install them on the roof to make sure the roof is sound and to make sure that they don't do any damage to the historic resource itself during the installation. I think that's it. So as I said, what time is it? It's only 7:30. So we've got time. If you've got some burning questions that have nothing to do with this, then we can start with those. And then if we're all talked out and we still have some time, we can go over some case studies or vice versa. It's really up to you. I'm going to hand it over to Brad so he can moderate that.
Yeah, can you take that on your screen? Yeah, good.
Yep.
First of all, wow, we've got a great group here. I'm counting 24 people. Wow, it's fantastic, Regan. Great. Can we see though? I guess you can raise your hand. We're trying to figure out how many towns are represented here. I know Norwich is here. What other towns do we have here tonight? Just yeah, you guys can unmute yourself and say.
You can put it in the chat too.
Guilford.
What is it?
Guilford.
Guilford. Okay.
Wilton.
New London.
Yeah, go ahead.
Vernon.
Bristol.
Bristol. Wow. Yeah, it's great.
I see Bridgeport in the chat.
Bridgeport.
Granby. Great.
Yeah, we actually do need to know that, but this is a great turnout. It's really wonderful. Well, as Mary said, we do have some case studies which we can flash up, but I think really what we probably should start with, and I'm trying to look in the chat, was there, if there's no questions there, we certainly can, this is your meeting, and we do have some case studies we can go over around a lot of the themes that Mary raised, but there was a lot of information there. So if you have questions, comments, maybe we start with that. Any comments to Mary's presentation and any of the content? We did add a lot of rules procedure because we heard that was an issue. But it's kind of your meeting. What let's see what you guys think. Any questions, comments?
I can start us off, Brad, if we want to start with a question. Just something that we've experienced in Norwich, especially with this recent bout of bad weather that's been happening. There's been a lot of issues with people's heats or roofs or things like that where they've been damaged and need replacement. And we've had issues where people have an emergency where they are without heat for whatever reason or have damaged their roof and things are actively leaking and want to get work approved ASAP. And it's usually always, of course, in between meetings. So we have had a moment where we approve the work and then we retroactively approve the COA when it comes in later, but just wanted to know your thoughts about that and how we should handle emergencies like that moving forward.
Yeah, well, when you talk about roofs, I mean, what are, I mean, I had roof damage in the rain the other night, but it's a chimney, it's my flashing. So it's not, I mean, it's just more of a functional thing. I mean, are you seeing like redesigning of roofs or what?
There was one case a couple of years ago when we had another really bad storm where a tree like kind of went into someone's roof and caused like a big hole with active damage and active leaking. And so we had encouraged them temporarily to, put a tarp over the space. But, the homeowner was obviously anxious to get that hole covered as quickly as possible. So we had worked with them to, approve a retroactive COA where they used in-kind materials and got that taken care of, but just didn't know if there was a procedure for handling emergencies because, we can't help Mother Nature and things certainly happen, and just wanting to make sure that we're doing what's appropriate as well.
I can start. Go ahead, Mary. Yeah, go ahead.
If it's a general maintenance or repair, then it doesn't need a COA. But having said that, if we're talking about a roof that's like completely, that really has suffered damage, if the property owner doesn't know that they have to replace completely in kind, then that's where the COA comes in. So I mean, if they have like a slate roof and it gets damaged and they're repairing it, but they repair it with asphalt shingle, you may or may not have approved that, but that requires a COA because it's a change of material. But if it's an asphalt shingle roof and they just need to fix it and they're not changing the pitch and they're not changing the materials, they really don't, that kind of saves you some trouble. You don't really have to give them a COA for that. Also, and this is kind of rare, but if there's a public safety issue, like if the building guy comes by, woman or person comes by, then and issues a violation, by statute, that does not require a COE either. But I would definitely kind of work with them to make sure they don't do anything drastically different, even though it's been required by the building inspector. So,
yeah, if they've got a hole in the roof, man, you got to go out of your way to. I mean, that's an emergency, and you need to. Yeah, hopefully if it's asphalt, as Mary said. I mean, you want to give it okay and let the persons get it done. So I mean, I'm doing that right now. I've been meeting with roofers all day trying to figure out how to do it, but I'm not changing a pitch or anything like that. I mean, it's just a flashing, it's failed. But anyway, so I don't know if that answers your question, Regan, but I think it depends on the emergency. It certainly depends on what design changes there are. Any other questions that, and by the way, these can be real life issues that you're dealing with right now at the commission level that you can bring up too.
Yeah, I think we had in Norwich also, again, Regan, the heating, emergency heat. Hey, we're out of heat. We need to address this. The venting or the units are being placed, and you feel for that. You want to give them heat. They're in between meetings. Hey, do I approve it and retroactively here go back and change that? Along the same lines, also a little bit different though, but around here, if gas lines coming in, they want the meter outside, and then they want to put these pillars there so you can't run into the gas meter. So now you've got these two yellow pillars, and I'm not sure if anyone's dealt with that. I had them trying to move my gas meter outside, and I had to fight with them to say, no, I want it inside, and I have to get it inspected every 2 years or something to make sure that.
Actually, utilities won't let you do that anymore. They're all moving to the outside. So, but the ballast or the pillars you're talking about don't have to be yellow. there are other. I mean, and by the way, the reason those are there is so cars don't back into it and cause even more problems for the homeowner. But who put them in? The utility company or
I think the utility company puts them in when they put the meter in. But again, I fought them long enough that they allowed me to keep my meter inside, and I'm not going to let them through the door again.
Well, if it's already inside, but I'm just finding that asking, particularly on, if you're just putting gas in, you had oil heat or something, they really want the meters in the outside, partly because we don't let them in. They can't come in and do actual readings. So, and they can't really maintenance it. Mine's inside. So they have to write me a letter and, go through this whole song and dance. So anyway, but they are trying to put them on the outside. The pillars aren't always needed though, unless you're on a driveway with a lot of active cars. But anyway.
Yeah, I think our biggest concern was there was an issue with someone's heat, and we had to deal with that immediately as an emergency level. So that was something of concern to us. Sorry, Mary, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I mean that is the kind of thing that falls under your process. But I mean, I know that you've got a lot on your plate, and sometimes you're too busy to even do one meeting a month. But in specific times like this, as a public service, you might call an emergency meeting or a special meeting like 2 weeks, in between, and just say, hey, if you're facing an emergency situation, we can, we'll have a special meeting and try to get as many people, or, property owners that need COAs to come, or just issue a letter saying, look, but still, you still kind of have to keep an eye out. You could say, if all you have to do is, replace some shingles and you aren't doing anything different, go ahead and do it, but some people don't understand that, changing materials is changing materials. So you still kind of have to keep an eye on it.
And you can still ask them to come to the next meeting, to have them start working on, I mean, if you got a hole in the roof, you got to let them get going. But, you maybe ask them to come, to the next meeting, so hopefully you don't need to do a COA, but, sometimes you do.
Yeah. I think what we see also is our building department works in conjunction with us pretty well. And if they see there's someone's trying to pull a permit and they're in the historic district, they immediately say, no, you got to go to the HCC and get approval of a COA before they can do this.
But does everybody have that experience with the towns building department?
We in Vernon have
a lot of building departments are not real cooperative, and sometimes they don't even know you guys exist. Okay, or put it this way, they know you exist, but they don't really want to deal with you. So that's great news. And by the way, I just as a plug, if you guys don't know your building department well or your planning department, you need to get to know them, and you just need to let them know that you exist. And it seems obvious, but Mary and I can tell you, and Stacy, we all the time. I mean, I'm going through a town, they think you guys don't have any powers at all, and why should you be able to do this? So it's good to keep everybody close. And by the way, you guys, or most of you, are you're part of the town government. So you do have a right to call meetings and to really interact with them. I'm sorry, Bob, I think was starting to talk.
Yeah, I was going to say in Vernon, we got lucky the last 4 years, the current building official and his staff got really, really concerned about connecting the dots with the historic properties and districts, and they managed to get it all into the computer system they're using, and it comes up with a flag, and they reach out to us if somebody comes in for a permit who hasn't already come to us and received a certificate of appropriateness. So
wow.
Yeah, so for Vernon, I've lived here a long time, and that's tremendously forward thinking.
So there's like a little flag that goes over
your
set?
Yep.
Wow.
In their computer file. Yep.
Does anybody else have that?
We do in Norwich, yeah.
So
it's the east of the river towns are very forward thinking.
Hey, come on, rest of you guys, come on, that's not necessarily true. Is there any other comments? Mary did cover a lot of stuff. The rules and procedures, did that all make sense to you?
Brad, there's some questions in the chat right there too.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. Can Mary speak a little more about how we discuss other energy saving considerations with our homeowner that is seeking replacement windows? Yeah, Mary started on that. Mary, do you want to add to that?
Yep, as soon as I can unmute. I mean that should be the first conversation you have with them, is because a lot of times, there's no discussion of what the current condition is. Are we talking about like overall energy savings or just replacement windows? Because there's just always assumptions made. So you kind of want to walk the property owner through what is the condition of the original window and what would it take to restore it to a level where it will no longer leak energy. And frankly, it often does not take much. But we had this discussion last week, and I think what would be beneficial to commissioners, if they don't already have it, is like solid facts and figures, because that's another thing. People are like, you know, prove that to me. Prove to me that only 10% of the heat is lost through my windows. You know, prove to me, you know, and we do have studies and stuff like that. So one thing we'll do is share that with you. Preservation Connecticut might already have that on their website.
National Trust for Historic Preservation does too.
Yeah, but we'll gather it and post it and get it to you. But also, so you start with, okay, so if the energy is not being lost through your windows, is your attic insulated? Is your basement insulated? You don't need to insulate your walls, but you do need insulation in your attic and basement. That would go a huge way. Is your roof in good shape? I mean, I worked in a machine shop with, I don't know, at least 6-foot high windows, which we restored, and we replaced the roof. And you would not believe how much more comfortable it was with just a new roof with insulation. So just ask those questions. What else is going on with the house? Energy audits, will help them find out really where the energy loss is happening and what can be done to correct it. But I think your best not defense, but your best approach is to hit them with facts, because that's what these companies are doing. Well, they're not hitting them with facts, but they're like pressuring them with their own sales pitch. So
they're dealing with what's called alternative facts.
So you just have to come up with your own your sales pitch.
Yeah,
and we can
you got your tin men and you got your Windows guys, and they come. I mean, I get the flyers in the mail all the time. They offer you these great deals. You can buy three windows and get the price of two, and it's on and on. All I can tell you is you got to be really careful. The windows, or the quality of those replacement windows, are all over the place. They don't, just because you change them doesn't mean that you saved the energy either. So it's not advisable, but if you're going down that road, you better make sure you got the right windows, or else you're going to have bigger problems in the future. And Mary, while you're on, there's another question in the chat here. Is public speaking required? I think what he's asking is, in the rules of procedure, do you need to have a public section? Pete, is that what you meant in your question?
If it's a public hearing, then there is a portion that gives the public the opportunity to speak. If it's a public meeting, then that's not necessarily the case. A public meeting would be something that the public can come to, but they don't participate in. But a public hearing is usually about a specific issue that the public should be able to weigh in on, because it's kind of a decision-making process, like a COA for I mean, I used to go to the New Haven, the city of New Haven commissions when I worked for New Haven Preservation Trust. Everything's coming out of my head. And they always had, it was a hearing. And so they allowed the public to speak. And not just the affected, abutting owners, but, anybody that had something to say. So now, having said that, you might read a different definition elsewhere, but that is our working definition is that a hearing is for public participation.
It's advisable. I mean, you guys are a city, you're part of the city, and people do want to express their opinion sometimes. I mean, you can control the time, but I think it's useful to have. Another question that's come up here in the chat: sometimes the reason for replacing windows is because of lead paint, especially in a house purchased by families with children. Yeah, that's a big deal. all I can, if Mary, you want to add to it, but basically there are environmental consultants that you want to test to make sure what levels of lead paint. Just because there's lead paint doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad shape. It could be, though. There's certainly environmental consulting firms we can give you names of to to verify that. If indeed it is toxic, yes, you want to remove that. Basically along the friction surfaces around the window. It's a very serious issue with kids. The problem is about every house has, historic house anyway, may have the lead paint. So yeah, it's a big deal. And I should also say that it's also on the outside of the house that over time it flakes down into around the foundation. So you really should have it checked. I can't tell you it's cheap to remove it. You wouldn't have to totally remove it. I think what you're trying to do is just manage it, and the consultants can really kind of help you with that.
Yeah,
Mary, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Definitely, wholesale replacement is not the way to go anymore. There are better mitigation efforts and abatement efforts. We met with Department of Housing, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, and I got some really good literature. And I was actually very surprised to hear from them that replacing windows is not necessary. As Brad said, it depends upon the degradation of the I mean, I raised my children in a house that was built in 1956. It definitely probably, I don't know, but I assume it had lead paint, and I think they're okay. So you just have to know what the condition is and where it is.
Yeah,
it's not great to have lead leaching into your soil. So yeah, I mean, you do have to consider it, but I'm just saying that replacement is not the only option, and that encapsulation isn't the best option anymore either. There are ways to abate it without, with being safe, especially where children are concerned, and without destroying the feature.
Sure. I tried to put a message into the chat, but I think I'm probably not as good at Zoom as I should be. About a year ago, and I came specifically to see if anybody had any of this experience. About a year ago, the Historic District Commission in Guilford denied the demolition of a mid-century modern house that had been bought with no forethought by the town of Guilford. And they wanted to tear it down and turn it into a parking lot and replace a street front building with a storage unit. We denied that application, and our next step to that was to write for the town a grant to obtain some state money to help the town look at the buildings that they own, because they're one of the major landowners in our downtown, to look at the buildings they own, what those buildings can accommodate in terms of use, and then how the town can better use them so that we don't have that situation again. Well, the implementation of the grant is stalled because the building department is in such a mess. They've had mass resignations. Half the staff is on maternity leave. There's just like nobody there. And now we find out that at least one, maybe more, qualified applications to come and fill vacancies on the historic district are being held hostage by the town selectmen because they want a, quote, resolution on the building that we denied, i.e. they want us to let them tear it down. And I was wondering if anybody's had that kind of experience with politics.
Yeah,
we just wrote this out yesterday, so.
Yeah, we go through this all the time. But was this property on the National Register, or?
Yes, it's part of the, well, interestingly enough, our National Register nomination is old enough that there isn't a complete building by building list. It's within the boundaries. It was not at the time 50 years old. So given the way they were written at that point, it wasn't specifically mentioned. It's within the historic district, the local historic district. It is within the boundaries of the National Register district. And if that district were written today, it certainly would have been a contributing structure.
Well, for the future, SHPO and Preservation Connecticut, we are summoned all over the state around situations like this.
I tried to get you guys.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I don't recall that, but that's really what we're about, and you really need to pull us in. Todd, different part of SHPO, but Todd Levine is representing SHPO in these matters, and then again, Preservation Connecticut's a statutory partner for the SHPO, and we kind of usually work in tandem. So I'm a little concerned. So you reached out to us, and
I talked to Stacy.
We worked with Anne and
a little bit, and then you got sick, and we had to go to the meetings. And I think we handled the application for the demolition pretty appropriately.
Don't debate that. It's just that you could use all the support you can get.
Right. Well, the problem now is that the town is basically holding us hostage to reverse that demolition.
Yeah.
You shouldn't reverse that, by any means. And so don't let them, bully you on this. And certainly, since they're a CLG, I know you spoke with Mary today.
Yep.
So I think
CLG, you can't.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean,
not an option.
Well, but so what they're going to do is they're going to pack the commission with political hacks. They're going to come in with some new piece of information, call another vote, and reverse our decision.
They're
They
going to come in with another COA application. You don't revisit it.
No, another application for the demolition.
Oh, well, okay, then I guess this meeting is being recorded, but this is where SEPA, maybe you need to start getting some, we need to help you get a little extra protection there, I think.
Yeah, we just heard about this yesterday. So, and I did a round of phone calls and am working on this.
Yeah, we should have a call on that and just try to understand. Folks, now we're talking politics here.
Yeah.
Politics
yes, it's politics, but all of our appointees have to go through the selectman's office.
Right. I think that's all everybody's using. But you're supposed to also pick parties. I think
right, and the town committees pick the people.
Right.
We actually, at one point they said, you have too many Dems, we can't appoint any more Dems. We have a pretty heavy Democratic town, and we were having a lot of trouble finding Republicans. So 3 of us went down and re-registered as unaffiliated to clear out the slate of Dems so that there was room for a little bit of discussion.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is kind of off the tangent. We should probably just meet on this and try to.
I'm happy to have anybody who wants to be acquainted with it come to Guilford. Stacy, I think, has the piece that I wrote. I think a fairly cogent piece about why that building shouldn't be torn down. And I think we're sort of beyond that now. How do we deal with the politics of keeping the historic district as good as it has been up till now?
And you're not the only one who's dealing with this currently, as I told you today. It's happening in a number of towns where the town isn't happy with how the HDC is voting, and so they're not approving members, or they're sort of.
It's been a chronic problem in Guilford. My last previous intercession between terms, I was off for a year, and when I put my application in to come back on, they blocked my reapplication for almost 2 years because they were working on a condo project that they thought I would vote against.
That is raw politics.
You're just so obstinate, Ann.
I know. What can I say?
Yeah, unfortunately, the federal regs, I don't think speak to that, or the state regs, I mean, speak to that. So, we'll talk offline.
Yeah. But SEPA in this case also, we'd have to be careful since it is not a contributing resource to a National Registered District. We'd have to,
Yeah, that's the other.
So but how do you determine what the contributing structures are when there's no building inventory list?
It would have to be rewritten. the National Register nomination would have to be rewritten and go through the, through the review board. Yeah. And approved by the review board, the state review board. So that's
maybe time for an amendment to that original nomination.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A lot of the National Register nominations are old. We can, SHPO does have some money. We can work, again, a different part of the SHPO, but we can certainly pull in folks to look at that and see if we can amend it too, to add it. I don't know if that's going to help you though, if the politics is that raw.
Yep.
Does CLG give grants for the CLG grants go for like that kind of planning?
That's what we have.
Updating a National Register nomination?
Sure.
We have the CLG grant for other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we just awarded, just like Ann said, we awarded that grant for this for planning purposes. But yes, to answer your question directly, Bob, yeah, we do have funding for updating register.
I think in Guilford right now we would have trouble getting the matching part from the town.
Is there a private entity that supports, like a historical organization that supports this kind of thing, that could go for a survey and planning grant to update the National Register nomination?
Yeah, GPA might do that.
Yeah, we funded them before. And I know they obviously don't care that they're a certified local government, obviously. But I mean, in general, I mean, under normal circumstances, a CLG commission cannot have members, no members, zero members that are anti-preservation. Everybody has to either support it or have qualifications. And I unfortunately, there's no teeth there, and they clearly don't care. But so maybe just a calm conversation with everybody might yield something. I don't know.
They don't care about the money that's going towards the feasibility study for this building, but they might care about it in the future for another building.
There are two more buildings that are teed up to be vacated by the town that they're using now for purposes that are completely inappropriate, and they're starting to look around for what are we going to do. And I think those buildings are going to be next, and it's very dangerous for them to think that all they have to do is threaten us a little bit, we'll knuckle under, and then they can tear down whatever they want.
I'm seeing a 5-member commission.
What?
In Guilford?
A 5 board of selectmen, rather.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the political makeup, I'm really surprised.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
Maybe you need more conservatives on the board of selectmen.
Right.
Really?
You need something.
Well, politics in Guilford are pretty crazy right now. The Dems have pretty much put the Republicans out of business. So it was
I can see that. There's only one of them.
Totally uncontested election this year.
Wow, it's gerrymandering in reverse.
At its best, yeah, exactly.
Let's get to the other. So, Ann, I'll talk to Stacy. We'll stay in touch, and we'll try to.
Well, let's try and get you guys down to Guilford.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can set up a meeting with some of the first selectmen. I think that might be the best way of dealing with it. Yeah.
Yeah, we do need to get GPA involved. Too. I mean,
well, interesting thing is that GPA went to the selectmen on their own, and they said, well, that's a crap building, we don't care about that.
Yeah, they didn't care about the building. That was part of the problem. Like it's a little bit of a I don't want to say, like, it's not a conventionally
it's a tough case to make, but it's right next door. It's right next door to a Quonset hut. 10 years ago they wanted to tear that down. And now there's this great coffee shop. There's a little bit of stores. There's all kinds of fun things going on. And I think if you walked up and down the street 10 years ago, everybody would have said, that's derelict, we should get rid of it. Right. Now I think people would say differently. And we tried to make that correlation. 10 years ago, we told you this was going to be a good contributor to Guilford. And now you like it. And we're telling you it's going to be the same with this.
This building it's visually very interesting, and losing it in the streetscape would be problematic, because it does speak to the full expansion and time period of the entire district. It just the district nomination needs to be updated. I think that's probably helpful.
Yeah, sure. Well, and maybe we can't save one building, but we can save the future buildings. So,
well, that was pretty much my thought in writing that grant, because the town has outgrown the buildings that they have. They can't really provide the kind of spaces that the town needs. And so we were trying to help them think about how they use and acquire and treat their historic buildings.
And we were really excited about that
grant.
application and really happy to fund it. And so this is really disappointing. So maybe
well, they might get their shit together, but geez, I don't know. They hired a new planning and zoning director. She doesn't seem to be any friend of preservation. The zoning enforcement officer quit. The administrative assistant is on medical leave. You know, now is the time to do creepy things in Guilford because there's nobody that'll catch it.
Wow. Wow. Well, there's another question in the chat here. I just want to make sure we get to everybody. This one's you may have to explain your question. Are there any preservation organizations who are developing artificial intelligent tools that can help commissioners and homeowners learn about what would be appropriate for their home style, date, and region? We spend so much time educating and sometimes having about what's appropriate. Having such a ready reference would be a great boon.
That's a really interesting question. I think that's very cool. The idea of having like an AI ready reference of that is, you know, really the answer in historic preservation terms is having design guidelines specific to your commission. You know, it's sort of like creating those on our own. And certainly there's funding through SHPO for that. I don't know, David, what town you're in, so I don't know if you're a CLG, but there may be funding for the preparation of design review guidelines. In terms of AI, I mean, personally, I can tell you that I've tried to make a presentation using AI and it's just not there on architecture.
Yeah.
It's not specific enough. So, but we have launched a new website, Local Historic Districts, lhdct.org, and we've tried to compile a lot of information in that website, and that's at the end of this presentation. So I think that's something that you can use as a reference. Certainly, you know, all of us who have gone through preservation programs, we use McAllister's book, which is, I forget the actual name of the book, but we can send that out to you as a reference. That's something that calls out character defining features in different styles of buildings. And I think that's really helpful because then people get acquainted with what makes, you know, Greek Revival house Greek Revival, or what makes a small Usonian, you know, mid-century building or early 20th century building appear to be that way. So I think that's something that we can share. But in terms of AI, I don't think it's caught up yet with what we're trying to do. It's not there.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I've tried. Didn't work.
So are there any other kind of questions? I think we talked a little about windows. Anybody have solar issues? Mary went through with solar. Did that connect with anybody?
We have one installation of Tesla shingles, which we did because we thought we needed to be forward thinking. And I have to say, I was pretty impressed. It replaces the surface of the roof, so you don't have it, maybe you're familiar with it, but it's not built up the way solar panels are. The shingles have gone down a little shiny, but I think that once the sign in the front yard is gone, they are not going to call your eye up to roof. And so from my perspective anyway, I think it's a better solution than panels plastered on top of the roof. You don't have the issues of the vents coming through and they have to, you know, square around those.
Well, so I'm sorry. So they're shingles, though, right?
Yep, they're photovoltaic shingles made by Tesla
themselves, and they're not clear. They're actually colored like tile, like a.
Well, they're sort of dark gray black.
Dark gray, yeah.
And do they require full replacement of the roof sheathing though, right?
Well,
So
most of the roof surfaces have been replaced anyway in Guilford at least, and so you're just scraping off the shingle and the paper, you know. So it's not like we're
So
losing
you're basically
fabric.
taking it down to the sheathing and
Yep.
then put this on.
Well, there's some sort of sheathing that goes under that, and there's other things involved. But yeah, the structure of the roof stays. It's just the covering, the
Well, so assuming it's a eave, what's the other side roof look like? It's not touched.
They did both sides.
Did both sides.
I think so.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else have that? That's a rather newer technology.
Yep.
Guilford, I guess, would be the one that would be doing that more. Regan, I'm sure you're not seeing that yet in Norwich, but
Really?
So if we're back to the typical panels, and you know, does anybody have any issues or had any issues at the commission level not wanting to approve them, or have you always had a situation where you did?
Well, I'd like to bring sort of broaden the conversation to another part of this, and avoiding for a moment the necessity to remove historic fabric, but the time horizon that I see for our district is way beyond 10 years. And so in a lot of ways, the solar panel thing doesn't even really fit the whole notion of, temporary. I mean, they're going to be gone. They're not going to be there longer than fences are.
Well, I don't know about that. Why do you say that?
Oh, I think the technology is advancing so fast that the solar that we put on buildings now, 10 years from now, people are going to be taking it off.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. I do think solar is the wave of the future. And
I agree with you, but I think the technology of how we get that solar,
how do we put it on?
Yeah, is going to be so different that we're going to be taking those puppies off.
Barry, have you found any technical preservation briefs on this type of material versus an applied solar panel? Since it is replacing, I mean, I understand roofs are replaced and everything, but this is something that requires a more sort of invasive procedure to take place. It's not reversible.
And I know that Anne mentioned that once the sign drawing attention to it comes down, it's not as noticeable. But there's a couple things that kind of are not detrimental, but and this might be fixed by ongoing improvements in technology, but the integrated shingles aren't known for being as effective as the panels themselves. And then of course they do create a different appearance because they're shinier than regular whatever was there before.
Well, it was asphalt there before.
Right. But asphalt's not shiny.
It's not shiny. But these aren't as shiny as I thought they were going to be.
And that's great. But and so to your point, if they're, I'm sure that the solar panel industry isn't using preservation as their guidepost, but if it's as a happy byproduct, they become more effective and less visually intrusive, yay for us, and if the integrated shingles become, more.
The performance specs on these were remarkably good.
And that could very well be, because in this world, advances, are like, don't take 10 years, things improve, quickly. So that's great. But for a while, especially Tesla, were not performing as well. And so that creates a problem because then what do you do? Remove it. And then, what do you do with,
with the asphalt back?
Yeah.
Just like you would if it was asphalt to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a newer thing, and I think it's going to be a case by case basis, and you're right, it could get improved more and more, and it might be I think right now I think there's a lot of question marks on it, but
I think as long as this is why I think you just need to put some design review guidelines in place. I mean, the Park Service has published guidelines, and so it just helps you not feel helpless in making this decision. If you
Mm-hmm.
do the research and decide what or under what circumstances you're going to approve them, or what you need from the property owner to have an application that you can approve. But because a lot of the stuff that Stacy and Brad and I are seeing is are commissioners that are kind of caught off guard. They don't know, and so they don't feel comfortable rejecting the COA, application. And if they want to approve it, great, but you have to have good reason for it, and you have to feel like you're making an informed decision.
And as you know, it's all about the public way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the panels are behind on the roof, non-obtrusive, or behind the structure, that's not a problem. What a problem is we saw it in Tolland church. They wanted to put it right along the green, right in front of the church. Mm-hmm. And I think the big thing, and I just don't know how many you guys are getting faced with this, but you do need the professionals in there. You don't want to have just a homeowner coming in with a piece of paper, and you do need the actual professional to come in, talk to you guys, and say why they need it, where they do. If you don't have that, the homeowner probably doesn't know how to answer your questions. And if you guys are already unclear how to respond to it, you probably need that professional, the guy, whoever the installer is going to be, just to walk you all through it, and why they have to be where they want to be. And then you also can go back to them and tell them why they can't be where they might want them. At the end of the day, hopefully it can still work for the homeowner. But go ahead.
Line that stuck with me though is in the presentation there was something about when the lease is up, then have them removed. I mean, what teeth do we have to force them to remove them, I guess? And
well, I think you own them at the end of that period. As I understand the lease structure, it's a 5 or 10 year period. They're doing like a profit sharing with you. If they put it on, they still own it, and it's like a profit sharing. At the end of the tax credit, they get a solar credit, and I think it's like 5 years or whatever. When that credit runs out, they don't want it anymore. And usually what they do is they turn, they'll sell it to you or give it to you. They're all different. And you got to kind of be really careful. There are a lot of shysters out there, and you got to be really careful. And the best thing to do is to own them yourself, because you'll get 100% of the benefit. These guys, they come in, they talk fast and you think you're going to save all this money. They do all the work, they put it up, they take all the risk, and you go, oh, what doesn't cost me anything. The problem is they're making the money on the utility or on the savings, while you're only getting a smaller portion of that. So it's just good to be astute. But now you as commissioner don't have a role there. That's really up to the homeowner. I mean, you certainly can educate them, but at the end of the day, if they come in and say they want those solar panels, you still have to, listen to them and try to accommodate them,
Yeah, and the point of that comment was sort of that you can put conditions on an approval of a COA, and your teeth at the end is that you're a town government agency that has stipulated this, and so your zoning enforcement officer can enforce that. Now, again, 10 years down the road, I guess it depends on who's on the commission and whether they want to do that or not. But that's your authority, is that you've put that condition on the approval. And so if the homeowner does not meet that condition, then you get your zoning enforcement officer involved to compel them to meet the condition.
Got it.
I think over and over again, people are so hesitant to utilize their commission power. And I don't mean in an abusive way, but certainly a zoning commission doesn't have a problem telling someone to move a shed that's been installed if it's out of compliance, or a wetlands officer doesn't have a problem enforcing wetlands mitigation issues. So why can't you have the standing to have the same authority, and you can compel people to do things based on your decisions that have been recorded according to your ordinance. You have that power.
Yeah, well, but you want to
it's
negotiate.
Difficult to do.
you want to negotiate with the homeowner, and you want to, if you wanted to come down, if you want to put that kind of condition on, you got to really work with the owner, make sure they're okay with it. Again, your goal is to be happy here, not to make everybody hate you.
No, you don't want everyone to hate you, of course.
Yeah.
But you do want to be able to maintain your too. Yeah, it's a balance.
You want to feel comfortably executing your charge. But yes, it is about, these are your neighbors too. But it's the same with planning and zoning. Planning and zoning commissioners have friends too, I'm sure, It's just, you just want to be, it is a delicate balance, but just don't be afraid, be proud, and don't be afraid to own your authority, because it's given to you by state statute and local ordinance.
And should be supported by the rest of your town.
Sometime.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions? I mean, we're at 8:21. We've been going a long time. If there's, we don't really have to go any further if there's no other real questions. I think we were going to do case studies, but we kind of covered all of that stuff in some of the questions. So I don't know. Maybe we didn't cover enough on substitute building materials, but Mary certainly covered it. But are you guys seeing a lot of issues around that where the homeowners are asking for a lot of changes, or is that not really a big issue for you guys, for your commissions? Sounds like it's not.
Well, Norwich hasn't had any Tesla shingles asked for, that's for sure. We're lucky.
Well, substitute materials could be like porch repairs. It could be siding. There's all kinds of substitution. Stacy has a whole system here where it's just all these substitute materials that are coming online and hitting everybody's in the head. And you got internet, you got all these choices now, and a lot of times there's not a whole lot of information on this stuff, and we're trying to keep up with the technology. So when you guys as commissions get some of this substitute materials that you don't, composites or whatever it is, you should probably consult with us. We are trying to put together that list, and we're trying to stay in touch. But man, stuff's getting invented all the time, and it looks a lot cheaper sometimes too. So it's a hard one to do.
But again, hold, you have the right to ask. Sometimes the property owner doesn't even know what this material is that they want to use, because somebody got a hold of them, some manufacturer got a hold of them, and so they need to know what they're doing to their home too. And so that's sort of where you're a resource. And granted, if you don't know much about the material, then maybe we can help you figure out what it is. But the property owner can't just come to you and say, I want to slap this on my house, let me do it. They need to know what they're doing to their own property. And so they need to be able to explain to you, A, why the original needs to be replaced in the first place, and B, what exactly it is that they're using.
And asking for samples is great, because when we review products, on paper, they can look great and the performance stats can be wonderful, but then we get a sample in the mail and we say, oh no, it just, you hold it in your hands and you see it and you feel it, and it just is much different than it appears to be in photographs. So asking for that sample is part of the process.
Yeah, Brad mentioned online sources. I try to specify replacement materials when replacements have to be used that are in-kind replacements. You go to any lumber supplier's website and all they want to show you is the composite or the alternative to the real thing. Stair treads. I can't find a decent listing of stair treads for a porch stair. It's so imagine what happens when a homeowner tries to do this. Maybe there's a role somewhere where we're compiling a resource that we could then pass along to property owners beyond our design guidelines, or as an appendix to our design guidelines that talks about accessing some of these actual wood and other replacement products, because as an architect I struggle with this all the time.
Yeah. And as you say, it changes so quickly. New technology is coming out all the time. And I just learned about, we put together specific modules and training sessions on substitute materials. And, we learned about fast growth pine, soft woods, that are sort of cured. And those are becoming more popular. And the National Trust uses them on their properties. And they're becoming more affordable because they were, difficult to get over here for a while. So these things are changing so quickly that I think you're absolutely right, Bob. If we could add that as a section to our local historic district website as another resource, it would have to be updated quite often, but it's something that we should be doing too.
That's full employment for researchers.
Yeah,
exactly. It really is.
But I'm sure SHPO would support that. Right, Mary?
Mary says,
you
spending state money right now. Let's hear it.
So, folks, it's 8:27. I think we should call it a night, unless there's any last minute questions people have or comments, jokes. Any good final jokes? No. Well, I don't know. With that, I guess, Reagan, you have any final comments? Or
I'll just wrap up by saying thank you to Stacy, Brad, and Mary for being here tonight and giving us our presentation. And thank you to everyone for attending and providing such great comments for feedback. So thank you all so much, and happy holidays.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. See you next year.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.